A word of warning, this podcast explores graphic and disturbing stories and includes some strong language. It therefore may not be suitable for our young listeners or other folks who may find it disturbing. Hello and welcome to True Crime News, the podcast covering high-profile and under-the-radar cases from across the country every week. I'm your host, Ana Garcia. Our case this week, the killer who got away with some help from the very police officers looking for him. It's almost too incredible to be true. A young man is wanted for the murder of a love rival, and as the killer drives away, his car gets stuck on the railroad tracks. Police get the call and they help the young man out of the jam. It would be another 3 months before the killer would be brought to justice after that mess up. And we haven't even gotten to the love triangle part of this murder case. We are recording this on Thursday, January 30th of 2025. Our guest today is Robert Corbett, a former prosecutor and now criminal defense attorney. Robert, welcome back to the program. It's always great to see you. How are you?
Well, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me and providing me the opportunity to participate.
Yeah, we always love to hear from you because you have worked both sides. So we kind of feel we get a good center view of the criminal justice system from you. So I can't wait to hear your comments on this case. So this case has been called the Ivy League murder case. And that's because there was a secret obsession that an MIT student was holding for another student, and this apparently drove him to kill a graduate student at Yale. It is a classic love triangle. The thing is, only one person in this love triangle saw it as that. The other two had no idea about this secret obsession. And it's so interesting when you're talking about graduate students at this level, MIT, Yale, you think that if there's a rivalry, they're actually fighting over research or stolen work or something like that. And that is not the case here at all, Robert.
Yeah, it's certainly unusual. Normally, or most of the times when you see these types of cases, when you hear about the love triangle, you think about unrequited love, or you think about if it's a domestic violence case, or sometimes referred to as intimate partner case, you wonder or think about where there are signs that sort of built up so that, people could have seen what could have happened. But in this type of case, it's, as you mentioned, it was one person fixated on the other person, and the other person has no idea that this obsession is going on.
Absolutely none. She just thought that he was a friend and a former college student that she had attended MIT with. So she had no idea he was harboring these feelings. So it even took authorities a while to figure out the connection and the potential motivation here. And again, it still remains very secret because the accused killer, who is now the convicted killer in this case, has never quite admitted what was going on emotionally, but it's the logical thing. And the trigger in all of this was an engagement. So let's talk about the people involved so we can figure out how the triangle formed here. The victim is 26-year-old Kevin Jiang. He was a graduate student at Yale University. Kevin had recently asked his girlfriend to marry him. Her name, Zion Perry. Zion briefly went to school with an MIT graduate student named Qinxuan Pan. Qinxuan is the one accused here of the murder. So two men in love with the same woman, but nobody knows that Qinxuan is harboring these very deep feelings for Zion. It was a fatal attraction. The trigger is when Zion posted on her Facebook this video of Kevin proposing to her. He's on his knee. It's very romantic. The two had been dating for a year. So she posts this on her Facebook, and that apparently triggered this cascade of such horrific violence. Robert, it's so sad, especially when you're dealing with young people with such amazing brains that you would think their huge potential and their ability to reason would have stopped from this insanity.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When you think about in terms of the Ivy League students, some of the top universities in the country, and it's not the type of thing that you think that these people would necessarily be involved in or have these type of issues. You tend to think that maybe stereotypically that they are hyper-focused on their studies, and you have to be to a certain extent to reach it to this level. And for her to post the engagement on social media, we tend to live our lives out loud on social media. There's certainly nothing unusual about that. But for it to escalate to where Cheyenne would see this on social media, and then that would escalate to the point where he would need or felt the need to carry out this crime, it almost seems in terms of unthinkable, because it's hard to imagine of how that one incident could then move to something as horrific for him to then want to carry out the crime of first-degree murder or carry out the crime of murder.
Unless, of course, this has been brewing for a very long time, and then this is the final thing that sets him off. Clearly, he didn't just wake up one day and say, "Oh my God, I'm in love with her." He had clearly been secretly obsessing over her, and we understand from authorities that, he would message her on Facebook, and he had asked her to FaceTime once, and she just didn't want to. They were friends. They weren't good friends. So she had no idea when police came to her, when her fiancé was murdered, and we're going to get into the crime. She had no idea. He was never on the radar as a potential suspect in all of this. And it was so perplexing to her when she's like, him? Really? So, goes to show you have no idea what's going on in someone's head upstairs. Okay, let's get into the crime here. This was truly shocking for the Ivy League community of New Haven, Connecticut. Kevin was gunned down on February 6th of 2021 around 8:30 p.m. Kevin was a reservist with the Army National Guard. He was well-liked. He wasn't known to have any enemies. The 26-year-old was active in his church, and he had recently been engaged. So he had everything to live for. He recently was engaged to Zion. By the way, he met Zion at a Christian retreat. So that tells you a little bit about their relationship, how they met. So the pair really seemed like a perfect match. She was a grad student at Yale studying environmental science. He, Kevin, was working on his PhD in biochemistry and molecular biophysics. Okay, they're going on about their lives. 1 week after the engagement is posted on Facebook, Kevin would be ambushed leaving Zion's apartment. The killer waited for Kevin to get into his car, and then the killer rammed the car, forcing Kevin to get out of the car, right? You've just been rear-ended. You get out of the car to figure out what the heck has happened, and presumably you'll be exchanging information. From Kevin's perspective, there's nothing to be too fearful of, except, of course, for the car accident part of it. So Kevin gets out of his car, walks back. There's a black SUV that has just rammed his Prius. And apparently, based on the video, it seems like the black SUV starts to reverse out of frame. And then that is the last time Kevin is seen alive. Kevin disappears from view. There's a scream. 8 gunshots are heard. An autopsy would later reveal that Kevin suffered multiple gunshot wounds to the torso, extremities, and the face. I always say where the gun is pointed tells you a lot, especially in a crime that is, this is a crime of passion. Is it not in the moment, or is it? What do you think, Robert?
Well, excuse me, I wouldn't characterize it as a crime of passion as we usually use that terminology, in that when we typically say in terms of the crime of passion is where one spouse arrives home, sees the other spouse engage in acts with their paramour, and then in that sudden heat of emotions, then the crime is carried out. So this I wouldn't necessarily count as crime of passion, but I would characterize it as being premeditated. And a lot of times when we say premeditated, doesn't mean that he had to plan this out over that entire week period, although that is entirely possible. It could have just been in terms of had the plan to have some type of interaction to encounter him because he intentionally rammed the vehicle, and he could have formed that intent to kill in that moment. And under the law, that those moments could count as premeditation and or deliberation.
Shell casings were found at the scene, .45 caliber. A witness who lived near the scene told police that the killer walked over to Kevin as he was dying, paused above his body, and then fired more shots. That sounds very close and very personal.
Right, and that's certainly an intent to kill. And this is where, in terms of putting on defense attorney hat, that there can be shootings, but not necessarily that intent to kill in that moment. There's certainly an intent to harm that person. But when you have the shots to the torso and the head, those are shots intent to kill, if not severely maim the person. When you have shots after the person is already on the ground and is obviously not in any type of defensive or aggressive posture, and then to still fire a shot, those things can be taken in as certain aggravating factors to show that this was the intent to kill that person and that intent was carried out.
The question, who would want this doctoral student murdered? And no one could figure that out at the time. So remember, Qinxuan Pan was not on the radar at the time of this shooting. It may be February, but most people are still doing their best to keep those New Year's resolutions going. If you're in debt, I have a great resolution for you to consider. Make this the year that you get on top of your finances. The first step is to contact PDS Debt for a personalized debt solution. If you're making payments every month on your debt and your balances aren't going down, PDS has the solution for you. Everyone with $10,000 or more in eligible debt qualifies, and there is no minimum credit score required. Bad and fair credit is accepted. Save more while paying off your debt in a fraction of the time. Being in debt can feel scary and overwhelming. So where do you start? How do you climb out of it? But remember, you're not alone. PDS Debt can help. Make this the year you take control of your debt. Get a free debt analysis right now at pdsdebt.com/truecrime. It only takes 30 seconds. That's pdsdebt.com/truecrime. pdsdebt.com/truecrime. So let's go back to the crime scene in Connecticut, because now you'll understand all the missed opportunities and, sadly, how he got away. And he didn't get away because he was so brilliant. He got away because the cops didn't realize that there was a killer on the loose, and this was the description of the killer, and this was the description of the car. So a half hour after Kevin is murdered, police officers make contact with the killer, but they don't know that he's the killer. Police get this call that a driver in a black SUV is stuck on railroad tracks behind some local scrapyard. Cops find Qinxuan, the driver. He's calm, doesn't seem to have any background problems. You know, they run your license. Police are very helpful to this young man who appears to be stranded. They call a tow truck, and the cops are helping him. They say to him, look, the truck's going to be towed to the yard. You're going to need a place to go. It's February and it's cold. So they take him to the local hotel, the Best Western. So he's got a place to stay. Cops remember some of his items that he's carrying. This will be very important later. He had a yellow jacket, a blue bag with a Massachusetts logo on it, and a black briefcase. Again, this will come back to authorities when there is a discovery made at a local fast food restaurant where a bag was dumped. So in the morning, now this is the next morning after Kevin's been murdered, it's about 11 a.m., an Arby's employee in North Haven contacts authority and says, hey, I found a really suspicious bag that was just dumped here. So authorities go over there. The Arby's, by the way, is next door to the Best Western. Again, he may be brilliant at MIT, But when it comes to leaving clues and leaving evidence, not so smart. The items recovered by the Arby's include a black briefcase, a blue bag with a Massachusetts logo, a yellow jacket, and the very same items the police remember that was in Qinxuan's SUV. So more troubling, Robert explained this one to me. The officers recovered 3 license plates, ammunition, a .45 caliber gun, and that's the same caliber as the shell casings found at the scene.
As brilliant as he is to be working on his PhD, he certainly is not taking any steps to try to cover up his crime. And I was thinking in terms of imagining what is going through Qinxuan's head at this time, in terms of he realizes he just committed a murder on someone engaged to who he is fixated on. And then he has this interaction with the police and has to think that at any moment they're going to put 2 and 2 together and realize that he is the person that they're looking for. But the police don't realize that the crime is committed at that time or that he's the person. But to leave those items in terms of those count as circumstantial evidence, because you don't have an eyewitness to say that they saw Qinxuan do it, but you have these circumstantial pieces of evidence, such as the gun, the same caliber of gun, the gun that can be matched up to the shell casings, all showing that this was the weapon that was used to kill Kevin. And this is the weapon that is in the vehicle that Qinxuan was last driving.
Yeah, and later, as you'll see, we'll do this in chronological order, there will be evidence that comes back, forensic evidence from this bag, such as gunpowder residue on the sleeve of the jacket, fingerprints. So it's really something how sloppy he was. But even in his sloppiness, he got away for 3 months. He was able to hide for 3 months. So it's at this point that the dots are finally connecting, right? Because the cops are like, hold on a second. I remember this guy from the yard. Hold on a second. A black SUV, that's the SUV that rammed this poor student, from Yale who's just been gunned down outside his girlfriend's apartment. So all those dots are connecting, but they don't know where he is, and they certainly don't know the why yet. 2 days after the murder, more evidence. A dealership in Malden, Massachusetts, that is where Qinxuan lived, reports that an SUV has been stolen. Apparently, Qinxuan took the SUV out for a test drive and never came back. Robert, whenever you take a car for a test drive, they always take a copy of your insurance. They take a copy of your license. Sometimes they even keep and hold on to your driver's license while you're out on a test drive.
Yeah, so for kind of just further cementing the fact that it's not something that he probably planned out necessarily in advance, probably didn't have in his mind to confront Kevin, but not in his mind in terms of, I'm going to take this vehicle, leave identifying information, drive over to Zion's apartment, assault and then attack, kill Kevin, and then leave incriminating items also around so that they could later be discovered. So and this isn't unusual when you think about in terms of, it's good police work that they're able to put this together, but you're not, in the majority of the crimes that we see, you're not dealing with these criminal masterminds who are covering up their tracks such that they can never be detected. A lot of times things sort of happen in the moment, but like we said, those moments can be very short, but still count as premeditation.
Well, I believe that he fully intended. I mean, the fact that he got the vehicle, drove to Connecticut, had the gun, knew where Zion lived, waited for Kevin. I mean, I do believe he drove down there with the intention of, at the very least, confronting Kevin. Right. Now, was the intention to kill him? I suspect yes. I suspect in his brain, the only way he was going to have Zion was to get rid of Kevin. And this wasn't going to happen through a gentleman's discussion of Ivy League students. That just wasn't going to happen. So that's just my personal opinion. And then authorities think that there was even more premeditation where, as we'll learn, he apparently had pulled this stunt before with the renting or actually the taking of it, the test driving of a car and disappearing and doing what looks like test runs to Connecticut, Massachusetts to Connecticut, not that far. So U.S. Marshals now become involved because we now know the car has been stolen from a dealership in Massachusetts. They're pretty sure who did it. They've connected the dots because they know who got stuck on the railroad tracks. Everything, all the dots are connecting, but no one knows where Qinxuan is. So they send police to his parents' home. They're in Malden, Massachusetts, because he lives with his parents, and there's nobody there. So now police are like, hold on a second. We've got a kid here who we suspect could be involved in a murder. His parents are missing. Oh my gosh, what if he's kidnapped his parents? And that's how the marshals get involved. And now they're able to, they start tracking Qinxuan's cell phone, and that gets authorities to a gas station in Graysburg, North Carolina. Here,
I'm not even familiar. I'm sorry, I'm in North Carolina, and I'm not even really familiar where that is.
It's a tiny little place, I guess. So U.S. Marshals then figure out, they get to the scene, they get to that location in Graysburg, and they recover the cell phone, which has been damaged, crushed, and flattened. So I don't think that was an accident. I mean, it could have been tossed out a window and flattened by a car, but nonetheless, it seems to me that that was a deliberate act. And that's as far as they got for a little bit. Then police are also, remember, they're looking for the Pans, his parents. So they're using license plate readers from all of the highways, and they track down Mrs. Pan's car. It is now February 11th. Officers pull over the car, and the parents are in the car, but not the son. Now, tell me about this part, Robert. The Pans tell police that their son called them. He said he was in trouble, so they drove to Connecticut, and they picked him up. Remember, the SUV was left at the tow yard from the time it was towed from the railroad tracks. And it wasn't until the next morning that they realized who they were looking for, but they also didn't know how he'd gotten out of town. Well, quite simple. Called his parents. They came to get him. They drove him to Georgia, but the parents refused to say where he was. And here's the other thing. Parents tell authorities he simply walked away from them, and they just assumed that he was going to take his life. Authorities didn't believe that.
Yeah, and that sounds certainly odd in terms of every parent wants the best for their child, and it's not that hard of to imagine a parent picking up their child and driving them somewhere. But they know in terms of that he's in some type of trouble, and they are aiding and abetting in his flee from law enforcement because they know he's in trouble. They're picking him up. Law enforcement is asking where he is, and they're telling them that we don't know. He just walked away, which defies logic. I mean, law enforcement knows that's probably wasn't true at the time. But you can always consider actions of an accused person after the crime was committed to kind of see in terms of what their mindset may have been when the crime was done. The fact that the cell phone was destroyed will lead you to think that, as we all know, your cell phones are able to track you. We have GPS. Everyone is aware of that. So to destroy the cell phone is an attempt to keep law enforcement from tracking down its movements.
Yeah. And
but a little too late.
And here's the thing, as far as the parents' alleged involvement, they haven't been charged with anything, and it doesn't look like they're going to be. They may not have known when he called and said, I need help. He could have said, oh, my SUV got stuck, or my car got stuck on the railroad, whatever. He could have said anything, and they went to go get him. And they may not have known they wouldn't know who Kevin is. Why would the parents know who this student is at Yale? Has nothing to do with their son. So they may not have known that there was a murder in New Haven, Connecticut. But here's the thing. When police finally pull them over because they've tracked the cell phone to this location and they know how far he has gotten, At this point, authorities would have said, well, we need to find him because we think your son is involved with the murder of a Yale grad student. So would they not have known the severity of the situation at that point?
Oh, they would have. And I agree with you in terms of, I think there is some evidence to support a charge of the parents based on what we've been discussing. But like you said, unless you have details or recordings of those exact conversations, they might not know exactly what was wrong, just that he needed help. So it could be some issues in terms of making that aiding and abetting charge now that we're talking that out. But at that moment of where law enforcement tells them or could potentially have told them that, look, we are looking for him because of what may have occurred. And that at the very least, he is a person of interest that we need to talk to. At that point, when they realize, okay, the severity, this is why law enforcement are looking for him, they could have shared more information about his location.
So marshals are not going to get any more information out of Mr. and Mrs. Pan. That's not happening, and they know it. So they start surveillance on the parents. They know if they watch the parents, hopefully they will find the child. Meanwhile, they're a little worried that Qinxuan may have the resources to get out of the country. Okay, so you have dual investigations going. The parents are being watched to figure out if that will lead them to this suspect. Now the forensic evidence is starting to come in, as I mentioned. So that yellow jacket, gunshot residue on it. Qinxuan's fingerprints were on the gun that they found in the bag at Arby's, also incriminating, but they still didn't have a motive. So, third track of the investigation. Let's go talk to Zion Perry, the woman whose fiancé has just been murdered, to see if she can help us figure out what this guy has to do with any of it. And this is the part where Zion Perry is absolutely perplexed, according to investigators. They just couldn't, she had no idea. She said to them, I thought he liked me, but liking someone, which you can kind of pick up on, to go from there to murder, that's a huge leap, especially someone who is not in your life, who lives in another state. It's just, why would you think that of all people, he would be the threat?
All right. And then, like I said, so she knew or suspected that there may have been some interest on Qinxuan's part, but there was no reason for her to make that type of intuitive leap to think that he would then want to harm her fiance based on their limited interaction in terms of no dating history, communicating, perhaps, briefly over social media or what have you. But there was no reason for her to think that he would want to harm Kevin.
Yeah, exactly. And police went through her Facebook messages. It's it was boring stuff. There was nothing in there that anyone could read into as an obsession that would lead to a murder. So it's unclear at what point Qinxuan started planning this attack. Remember, there was only 1 week from the announcement until the murder. Not a lot of time, but still plenty. And police believe that he had been taking cars on test drives and going so far as Connecticut is their suspicion. Now, this theory, I don't know what to make of this one. And it isn't proven. It's a police theory. These test drives that he made coincided with a string of shootings in Connecticut in the New Haven area between December 2020 and February of 2021. In each of these cases, homes were fired upon, but no one was harmed. A dark SUV was seen at the scene at 2 of the incidents. Officers also found .45 caliber casings at each location. Authorities believe that Qinxuan had orchestrated those shootings to maybe make it look like Kevin's killing would have been a random shooting based on the history of crime in that area. I don't know.
Yeah, that's certainly an interesting take. I hadn't thought about that, but that would show in terms of, on some level, trying to cover up your tracks. But if when you have shell casings located and then you have the murder weapon, then they can be compared to see if they were fired from that same gun. So the mere fact that they're 40 the same caliber um, is coincidental, so to speak, but you'd have to do those tests to be able to say if it was fired from the same gun. And then if so, then that's certainly something that they will be looking at or could look at to see if they wanted to bring any additional charges.
Yeah, it's a very like this theory. This theory, and there has been no trial. He took a plea, so we'll never get these details. We might if they open up the case files. That's always possible when a case is adjudicated. This to me sounds like the mind of a really smart kid, right? The planning, the setting up, the making it look like there's this crime in the area. But let me counter one thing here, because I've spent quite a bit in the New Haven area. And there is quite a bit of crime already in New Haven, Connecticut. So I'm not sure that him allegedly setting up these shootings really would have changed anything other than maybe making it look like the same vehicle, a black or dark SUV. That's all I'm tossing out there. There's already plenty of crime in New Haven. So I don't know if you needed to add this to the mix.
Right. So like I said, there's already enough, but it's something in terms, obviously, to sort of like to think about in terms of, was he trying to say that, look, I'm going to eventually harm Kevin, and then if I engage in these other acts, perhaps I can throw some suspicion somewhere else. But it's so, as he's indicated, in Connecticut, like probably everywhere else, there's going to be crime. Dark SUV isn't that identifiable, so to speak. Same 45, it's not that unusual of ammunition, but certainly something to kind of think about. If there was more of a connection, then law enforcement could decide if they wanted to pursue that.
Yeah. So let's get back to the U.S. Marshals following the parents. It is now May, and the parents have traveled again to Georgia. Last place they were pulled over. This time, they are with another couple. They're apparently on a trip, like a vacation, and they stop at a hotel. And apparently, they asked the hotel clerk if they could use the hotel's phone or the clerk's phone, not their phone. They place a call. As you know, U.S. Marshals are following them, so they trace the call. The call is made to a boarding house in Alabama. U.S. Marshals raid the boarding house in Montgomery, Alabama, and who do they find there? Qinxuan. He surrenders willingly. He had about $20,000 in cash. He had multiple phones, SIM cards, along with his father's passport. His run-in days were over. Okay, he gets taken into custody. There are multiple delays in this case. And then the killer finally makes a decision to enter a plea and avoid a trial. On February 29th of 2024, Qinxuan pleads guilty to Kevin's murder, and he was recently sentenced. Okay, now, I don't know if this sentence feels like enough to me. He's sentenced to 35 years without parole. He'll be 65 when he's released, which will be in 2056. A young man's life was taken. 30 years?
Yeah, and I'm probably the wrong person to ask about that in terms of the types of cases that I see or work on. And when I take a objective look in terms of, I have to say that is an inordinate amount of time, a significant chunk of your life taken away, and being inside the a correctional institute. But that doesn't negate the pain and suffering that any victim's family is going through. And if you're on that side, you probably think there is no amount of time that can ever be enough, because those are the types of wounds that can't fully heal. And our criminal justice system isn't designed to really do that anyway. But that is a significant sentence. But it is something that would not probably satisfy Zion's family.
No, or Kevin's family. Absolutely not. I don't know. I feel with the amount of evidence that they have against him, had this gone to trial, I suspect there was a good probability he would have been convicted, and I suspect given a much harsher sentence.
Well, and then that's the cost benefit analysis that's done in every trial, especially the homicide trials, of where you're looking at, if I go to trial and lose, then the defendant is looking at life, if it's declared capital, versus if you take a plea, which majority of cases are resolved by plea, then it is something significant. So I guess in this case, rather than risk going to trial and possibly getting life, then the offer is 30 plus years, which is, I can understand it's harsh to say, but that's sort of in line with what you may see with a homicide plea.
So his parents were never charged with any crime. What do you think about that?
I think based on what we've been talking about, there is evidence to support a charge against the parents in terms of not providing information when they first spoke to police. That could be hard to prove, but for the U.S. Marshal's Office to stay on the parents, to continue to monitor their phone calls, and then to see that they are in communication with them, may not be able to prove that they provided the $20,000 to him, but by providing the dad's passport, they are certainly aiding him in evading law enforcement. So there are certainly grounds to charge them. I said there's probable cause. There's evidence to support a charge against the parents based on their involvement once U.S. Marshals got involved.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that they weren't charged with anything.
Yeah, and that might be in terms of communications with Kevin's family. Sometimes a prosecutor's office can take that into consideration. But maybe one of those things that not known unless, like you mentioned, unless the file is eventually opened up to see like what additional information did the parents give to police, or how cooperative were they once once Pan was eventually arrested and charged.
Yeah. So tragic. 3 young people with their entire lives in front of them, with amazing opportunities that probably would have paved their way. You have one young man dead. You have a young woman devastated by the trauma of this horrific murder. And then you have the killer here who didn't have to take a life. It's like it is a really tragic case. It is time for our comment section. These are the crime cases you all are talking about on social media, and our producer, Will Updike, is here now. Hey, Will.
Hey, Anna, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Doing well. Good to see you, Robert.
Hey, thank you. Good to see you as well.
So this week we have a case, I guess I'm calling it Making a Big Deal Over Biggie Fries. The case comes out of Louisville, Kentucky, where a suspect faces multiple counts of assault after opening fire on a Wendy's employee when the suspect became enraged that his fries were cold. Gotta watch the temperature of those fries. It seems to be a hot topic, especially in this segment here. But the suspect here, Monia D. James Wooten, was visiting a Wendy's drive-thru with 2 female co-defendants when the temperature of the fries led to an exchange of gunfire. The incident unfolded on January 6th of this year at around 10:41 in the evening. According to police, this began with an altercation between Monia and the victim in the case at the drive-thru here. Things start verbally, they sort of escalate, and this leads Monia to enter the Wendy's location with 2 unnamed female co-defendants who were with him at the time. So when they get inside the restaurant, This altercation continues, and eventually Monia and the two unidentified female co-defendants allegedly start firing multiple shots at this employee. We don't know the extent of the conversation before it gets there, but this thing sure escalates quickly. However, when they open fire on this employee, what they weren't expecting was the employee to strike back. This employee, she reportedly produced a firearm of her own and returned fire in this. Police say that Monia continued to fire, eventually striking the employee in the butt area. I don't know, if that was a ricochet. I don't know if people got turned around at some point. It's unclear exactly how they got, in this exchange gunfire. They took a shot to the back, but who knows? Monia and the two unnamed female co-defendants then fled the scene, but police obviously arrived pretty quickly, and this entire incident was caught on security camera. I don't know how you think you're getting away with any sort of firing of a gun at a drive-through or any chain restaurant. They're definitely going to have security cameras all over that dang place. So the employee here, they were hospitalized for treatment of her injuries, but they don't appear to be life-threatening. Now, after the shooting, how the suspect here and these two unidentified female co-defendants end up getting named is one of them calls police to say that she was shot in this incident. So authorities claim that, she came and talked to police and she admitted to being at the Wendy's when the gunfight occurred. This led to the identification of Monia, who actually turned themselves in to authorities on January 17th. So just a little over a week after this whole thing occurred. And Monia is currently behind bars in Louisville Metro Corrections while he awaits judicial proceedings on 2 counts of second-degree assault. It is unclear. Both the women who were with Monia were identified as co-defendants, though we don't have their names or any additional information. So I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen with them. But this is a pretty wild one. I feel like, Robert, you talked about premeditation early in the show and versus heat of passion. Where does this fall? I mean, this started in the drive-thru. You had time to sort of, get over the temperature of the fries, drive away, move on, but you're coming back into the location and just escalating the whole thing.
Yeah, you're making the prosecutor's argument. That's exactly what they're going to say. And when you're talking about this, first I was thinking first Waffle House and now McDonald's. And it's a case of, as a defense attorney, of where you're forced to hold your head up high when you walk into the court with your client on facts like this. There's so many opportunities that they could have turned around, and it didn't have to get to this point.
Yes. Yeah. And luckily, it doesn't seem like anyone was seriously harmed in this, although a couple of people did apparently take a bullet, which is not ideal. I don't know. Anna, what's the most mad you've ever been about a fast food mix up?
Oh, I mean,
have you ever shaken your fist over some cold fries?
Oh, God, no. Right? Like, that's the whole thing. It's your reaction should be equal and opposite to the situation, right? Just very simple way of looking at life. The fries are cold. It's the wrong dressing or the wrong dip. It's like, these are all things that are easily solvable. And they do not require a weapon or violence. This is the part I don't get.
Yeah, I agree. It's extreme. And I'll also just hot tip. I mean, you can just put fries in the oven. They'll stay crispy, and you can heat them right back up. Sometimes they're even better than they originally, come out from the fast food drive-thru.
I mean, come on. This is just, I just see it as this loss of respect for human dignity and the other person. We all have moments when we're maybe not our best selves, and we wish maybe we had handled something better or had more regard in a moment, but not like this level of violence.
Yeah, it's pretty incomprehensible for me. And I will also say, in terms of fast food fry rankings, Wendy's is not at the top for me. I feel like generally the fries are not like, piping hot and fresh. They're a little thick. It's, to me, this would be somewhat to be expected if I had gone through a Wendy's drive-thru.
What annoys me more than any of this, I mean, in just a situation when you're at point of sale, right, is the self-checkout at CVS. That machine is constantly talking to you. It's like, put your item in the basket, put your item in the basket. And it's constantly talking at you and it's loud. And all I ever do is I caught myself the other day. It's like, I hear you, I'm moving it. And it's like, I'm talking to a machine. That machine infuriates me. It's taken over everybody's jobs. There used to be checkout clerks that used to have that job. I would rather have a human have a job than the machine. But, that's me against a machine.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, yeah. Well, if you're really trying to strike back at that machine, I don't even think you need a gun. You can just dump a cup of water on it or something.
Oh, God, no. But I realized as I'm like talking back at the machine, it's like I'm putting it in the basket. And I realized the person next to me is like, what is wrong with this woman? She's talking back at the machine. It's like, we all have these moments in everyday life that are just stressful. But come on. You cannot pull a weapon and shoot at an employee who works likely for minimum wage because your fries are cold. Get over it.
Yeah. Behave yourself at the Wendy's. Behave yourself and respect each other everywhere. We got a lot of comments on this one. Kobe wanted to know, why was the employee strapped? I gotta say, don't have a lot of information on that. It's really interesting. I don't know that much about this specific location. I don't know if they're sort of accustomed to weird things happening. You never know if this employee had some sort of concealed carry permit. You never know what has happened in their life previously to lead them to this incident. But I bet for a fact that when they allegedly escalated this argument, they were not planning on an employee firing back. I think that had to have been the furthest thing from their minds when they allegedly sort of amped this whole thing up. Some people were, obviously in favor of the employees. TJB said, not going to lie, I'm a little bit tickled by the fact that the victim shot back. I don't want to see any exchanges of gunfire, but I do like anytime, whether you see it on social media or something where like managers are empowering their employees, especially in some of these like sort of confrontational things with, with customers and stuff, not to the point of violence or anything, but like employees, can put their foot down and saying, no, they don't have to put up with being disrespected. And I don't think that obviously they need a gun or anything, but I do think that it is great when these employees can acknowledge that they are human beings and deserve to be treated as such.
So, Robert, I have a question. Could this be self-defense, the employee firing back?
Oh, absolutely. And
Yeah.
I was thinking not only self-defense, but depending on the state and the laws that they have, it could fall under castle doctrine, meaning there, in terms of castle doctrine, you are entitled to use deadly force to defend your home, your workplace, or your vehicle in those states that have it. And then for self-defense, assuming that the employee was licensed to carry a firearm, well, notwithstanding that, but the fact that the defendant suspect came in there with a firearm, presenting it, and showed deadly force, so therefore the employee is entitled under the laws of self-defense to use deadly force as well, as long as she wasn't the initial instigator. So even though they were arguing in the drive-through, she could have started that argument in terms of saying these fries are cold, you're going to take it. But the fact that the customer came inside and brandished a gun, that changes everything. That changes the dynamics, and the employee is certainly able to claim self-defense in that situation.
Makes sense. Yeah, makes sense. Dangerous situation. We got Brian G coming from the top rope on Wendy's as a chain. They said, Wendy's, huh? I mean, they don't even know hamburgers are supposed to be round. What makes you think they know fries are supposed to be hot? Which it gave me a little bit of a chuckle. I've always kind of liked the square patty. I thought it was pretty novel when I was a kid, but I will say their fries, they're not the best of fast food fries. Hans L, he's getting deja vu from this one. They said, crashing out over fries, and this is the third case I've seen where a guy did this. And I mean, I covered a lot of these cases in this segment, and it is bizarre, like how fries seem to be like one of the common denominators of a fast food crime. But like we talked about, no need to escalate it to this. As we said, I'll just reiterate, take care of each other, be respectful to one another, and I want to thank everybody who left comments on this one. You can do that over on our YouTube community page. You can also reach out to us anytime. We're across all social media at My True Crime News. But that'll do it for this week's comment section. And until next week, don't do crime.
Robert, thank you so much. Where can people follow you?
Thank you. I greatly enjoyed it. But I'm on all social media platforms at Robert K. Corbett, CORBETTESQ. And you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, or any other things that my kids can convince me to sign up for.
I love it. That's fabulous. You can find me at Ana G News, Ana with one N. You can find everything that we do at True Crime News at My True Crime News. That's our handle across the board. You can find this episode, all our episodes of our podcasts, wherever you all get your podcasts. Of course, you can watch this on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and that's where we have a very vocal community. So we can't wait to hear your comments on this week's case. Sign up to receive our newsletter at truecrimenews.com. So until next week, this is True Crime News, the podcast. I'm your host, Ana Garcia. See you next week.